call the council meeting to order. Would have roll call.
Cam Collier.
Here.
Chris Koshaw. Matt Dyer.
Here.
Tyler Fulenkamp.
Here.
Wiley.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You were all emailed a copy of our minutes from our previous meeting on October 4th. Any comments or corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve minutes.
Second. A motion and a second to approve the minutes from the October 4th meeting. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. We have a couple of ordinances this evening, and they are both third and final readings. The first one is ordinance 2016-14, which amends the current salary ordinance, restructuring the street department personnel alignment down there. And that again is ordinance 2016-14, which we have had the first two readings, only need to have the third and final reading this evening. If someone would like to make a motion on that.
Make a motion to place ordinance 2016-14 on third reading by short title only.
Second. I have a motion from Cam and a second from Tyler to place ordinance 2016-14 on its third reading by short title only. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Tim?
Ordinance number 2016-14, short title, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Decatur, Indiana, which amends city's current salary ordinance, ordinance 2015-15, which creates new salaried positions. No, I'm reading down here.
Okay.
Which creates new salaried positions, which establishes biweekly pay and funding for such positions, which eliminates an existing salaried position, which reassigns city personnel.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance 2016-14.
Second. Motion from Cam and a second from, who was it, Matt? For passage of ordinance 2016-14. Roll call vote, please.
Cam Collier.
Yes.
Matt Dyer.
Yes.
Tyler Fulenkamp.
Yes.
Wiley Sir.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2016-14 has been approved, passed. And the next ordinance then is next year's 2017 salary ordinance. That is ordinance 2016-15. Again, we had the first two readings at the last council meeting. Only need to have the third and final reading this evening. And
I'll make a motion to place ordinance 2016-15 on third reading by short title.
second. Motion from Cam and a second from Matt to place ordinance 2016-15 in its third reading by short title. Tim?
Ordinance number 2016-15, short title, an ordinance fixing the salaries and wages for employees of the City of Decatur, Indiana for the year 2017.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance 2016-15.
Second. I have a motion from Cam and a second from Tyler to adopt ordinance 2016-15 in its third reading. We'll have roll call vote, please.
Cam Collier.
Yes.
Matt Dyer.
Yes.
Tyler Fulenkamp.
Yes.
Wiley Sir.
Yes.
Ordinance 2016-15 has been adopted. And then the third thing on the agenda, and actually the last official thing on the agenda, is a presentation this evening from Kevin Biggs from Biggs Property Management, presenting his request as he's going to apply for funding for a loft housing project, some rent-to-own homes, and a few other things. So, and I've asked Kevin to try to be as detailed and in-depth as possible so that even I will understand.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for having me back in today. And I have prepared a few handouts, which I'd like to pass out to everyone.
Thanks.
And as I am passing these out, I was just taking a little walk back in time here to where this all kind of began with our stellar initiative here some years ago on making a sort of improvement to increase viability of downtown Decatur, and through that strategic investment plan that was crafted was a housing project. And also out of the plan was the sincere focus on the arts here in Adams County. And so we kind of brought those two concepts together with a proposal for housing for artists. And that has kind of evolved into what I'm presenting here today, much like what I brought to you here just a few weeks ago. I will point out that there have been one fairly material change in our overall project. And on the front cover here, I'm going to go through the three major components of the project. Last time I was in, there was actually four. So one component has come out of the project, and the reason being is that we grew the project to a size that exceeded the limit by the state agency on the maximum issue of credits to fund the project. We've had success in the past of requesting a variance on that and get an exemption. We submitted that here a week or so ago, and they denied that exemption. They're trying to just bring the scale of the projects down a little bit this current year. So we had to reduce the overall size and number of units. We thought the easiest and best way to do that would be to simply remove the component of the new construction homes in the East Ridge community, which were 12 homes of lease purchase. So, good news, bad news. We're not going to be able to include it in the housing project. Good news is that my director of sales has been just begging me to let those get released so we can do some for sale activity, because of the success we had about a year ago when some of those started to move and pick up. I've kind of held them off for this project, but we'll be able to deploy those out to the for sale public offering. So to go through the remaining three components of the project, starting with the 2nd Street Lofts component, which is the music house here on 2nd Street. 16 apartments will be developed on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors of that building. 2 units will be located on the 1st floor, and then the remaining units on the 2nd and 3rd floor. 11 one-bedrooms, 5 two-bedroom units. Also on the ground floor will be the co-working area or business center. Also the art center or flex room on the ground level. I noted possible dance studio on ground floor. I actually just got communication from the owner of the property there this morning that they're going to relocate their activities in a different space. They're looking actually to grow a little bit. The space we had provided wasn't quite sufficient, so we're going to kind of assist them and help them relocate. That will free up about 1,000 square feet on the main floor that we will simply transition into additional space or community space for the residents of the artist lofts. As I'm describing here the 2nd Street Lofts project, if you just want to look at the next little staple package together in your packet, which has a few pages there, just kind of depicting here what the artist lofts will look like. Obviously, the front cover there is the artist rendition after it's being redeveloped. On the second page, I did just want to include that 1st floor layout for you all. So you can see in yellow is the leased space that starting up front with the business center and the art center. And then there you see where it says dance studio. That will be converted into more community space for the residents. And then in the back, in the 2 blue boxes, that would be the ADA apartments on the ground level. I didn't provide you the additional layouts for the upper units, as I don't think that's quite as materially important for this meeting, but that does give you a feel for how that 1st floor will be laid out. And it will lead into the discussion a little bit further here as to part of the ask that we're making of the city with the city of Decatur, then taking back the front space, that business center and art center, as previously discussed. I'll move down through the second component before I circle back to the site plan for the downtown area. But the second component, the Country Brook Apartments, as described before, the Country Brook Apartments are currently an affordable housing community that we've owned, we constructed back in 1974, and they, because of the age of the community, is in quite desperate need of some recapitalization improvements. So by folding those into this project, we will be able to fund the redevelopment of Country Brook Apartments to about the tune of about $45,000 of hard cost per unit. So it'll be a very major renovation of the Country Brook Apartments. There are 48 total existing units. The scope of the project, again, comprehensive. On the interior of the units, they will be literally gutted down to drywall, some reconfiguration of a few units to make them fully ADA accessible to today's standards. But flooring, cabinets, trim, plumbing fixtures, HVAC, electrical fixtures, everything will be brought up to current day standards. On the exterior, we'll have new doors and windows and siding where applicable, roof gutter fascia, site improvements include new parking lots, landscaping, exterior lighting. So a complete renovation of that existing affordable housing community. The last component would be the 25 new homes in Fort Wayne. And again, the reason why we are choosing to kind of bifurcate the site in two counties is that the agency, which we are asking for funding, gives preference and incentive if we're able to utilize lots that were taken down through what's called their blight elimination program. And I think this was released about 3 to 4 years ago. Fort Wayne and Allen County participated highly in this program to the tune of about $7 million they received through the same agency, through IHCDA down at the state level. And so they're trying to kind of blend these two programs together. On one hand, the blight elimination program provided funds to go into neighborhoods that had very challenged properties that were either not occupied or had a high rate of vandalism and whatnot. And those homes were purchased through the program, and the homes have been demolished, and now they have vacant lots throughout these neighborhoods. So they're trying to get these properties back on the tax roll and to get a new investment back in the community. So by us utilizing those 25 lots now that we're working with Fort Wayne, we're securing additional points for our project here, as well as providing new homes in the community there in Fort Wayne. So those will be a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom unit homes, almost identical to what we did back in 2010 and 11 in a revitalization neighborhood in Fort Wayne called Renaissance Point, where we built 66 homes in about a 3 or 4 block area. Been tremendously successful. We were welcomed with open arms in Fort Wayne, coming back here and proposing these 25 lots to be used up through this program. So I won't spend a lot more time on that, as that is obviously in a different county, but I want to kind of explain how it folds into the overall project. I did include also in your packet this development narrative, and a little wordy. I don't expect you to sit down and study that here at the meeting, but much of this narrative was taken from the strategic investment plan through Stellar, as we described the overall concept of the housing for artists. And just a couple key points that I want to make. Again, this was really conceived by the planning process over those several year period. And you folks in the audience here today that participated in that process of what is the next step for Decatur to really become vibrant and attract talent and revitalize our downtown. But there is the co-working space that we want to make available for the residents, but not only for the residents, but also for the public, to bring a new asset to the community that's going to attract businesses and particularly attract individuals that can use their talents and grow into larger businesses through the co-working space. There was the desire for the arts community to kind of have, quote-unquote, a home. And so this art center that will be developing on the first floor in the front area also came out of that kind of planning process and brainstorming. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but I just do want to express that, much of this plan was all developed through that community input and our response to that input from the community. Those of you that obviously are familiar with Country Club Apartments, they're out on the east side of town. Just a visual, there have been some road improvements there and some investment by the community there in front that will help our project with the proximity of those improvements here with Country Brook. The last section, I'm going to next just get to the meat of the presentation here, which would be what we are asking for as a contribution from the city. So I'll direct your attention to the spreadsheet here, you'll highlighted. But you also may want to look at that third sheet of the site plan that was part of that music house package. Something very similar to this presented the last meeting. But so the main request here that we're making for the housing project is that, again, we are trying to maximize every possible point that we can get to be competitive to receive an allocation of funding to make this project move forward. One of those areas that are scrutinized are contribution, both private and public, to the development. And so we're coming to you today to request for some funding to complement the project. And as I discussed before, much of this funding the city has already kind of earmarked for specific projects, and we will be able to help accomplish those projects by those funds being directed into our housing project. So let me start with the high priority by the city to remove the blighted structure off of First Street, which is known as the Schaefer Building. And it's my understanding, Tim, that tomorrow you'll be closing on the property and gaining site control of the Schaefer Building in its entirety. What we would like to propose is for us to work with the city through a long-term lease agreement that, number one, would first allow us to have access to the property to demolish the property. And we are then asking the city for funding to take the building down, to bring it back to grade, and then for us to develop on that site what's shown on the site plan as parking and green space. Half of the parking that we are proposing here on the west side of my little dotted red line would be parking that would be specifically set aside for our residents that will be in the music house apartments. We need, at the very least, one parking spot per unit. So when we add up those parking spots, there are about 16 parking spots for those apartments. Just behind that, you can see there's some green space area. We will have a few amenities for the project. One of the other features that we get some points for is on-site detention. So we're actually going to have an underground cistern to capture rainwater off the roof. Just like in a suburban area, we have to detain water into a pond or detention area before we leave the site. A little more tricky on an urban infill, but the way to accomplish that would be underground storage cisterns. So that is also proposed. We are also then planning through the funds of our project to develop the rest of that parking space, which would then, I won't say be turned back over to the city, but it's city ground. We will be making those improvements on behalf for the city. So, as I then we'll kind of walk you through the spreadsheet of the ask. The estimate on demolition, which was provided to us from the city here about a year ago, was about $125,000 to demolish the building. There was also an estimate on the backfill and site work of about $75,000. We are asking that those funds be contributed to the project for us to complete that work. We're also requesting $15,000 for a facade grant, as we do have one downtown facade that will be obviously improving. We also have two figures in here for the brownfield remediation of $30,000, and then the construction of this parking lot, as I described to you, of an additional $30,000. So in total, now this figure has come down a little bit from what we presented here last month, mostly in part because there was also some TAP requests as part of the East Ridge lots, which we've taken out. But we're making a request of $275,000 from the city of Decatur. And then what I show at the bottom of that spreadsheet is what value the city receives in return for that contribution of $275,000. So the top line there, the improved Schaefer lot, that's simply the top two figures added together of the demolition and backfill, which totals $230,000. 50% of the Schaefer parking lot. So our estimate of spending $30,000 to make those improvements on the site, certainly half of those improvements are being made on city-owned property, so that's a direct benefit back to the city. The music house, current value, how I calculated that with that center section, where we're taking the square footage of the building. There's a $95,000 value to that building that we'll be acquiring. A percentage of the square footage that will be given back to the city for that co-working space and for the artist space equates to just under just over $9,000. But that'll be given back to the city. Then the last component there, the improved music house, we will be making improvements to that square footage in what we'll refer to as a gray box, so that the interior of that space can be fit out appropriately for the co-working space and for the music, the artist space. So that's just over $58,000. So the total recognized value is $312,813. So again, our request is that we're seeking a contribution from the city for those funds, and we feel that then the value that you'll receive back is in excess of the contribution that you're making for us.
First question.
Yes.
What if the costs of the things at the top exceed the estimate?
That is on our back.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long is the term?
Good question. Our tax advisors feel it needs to be, at the very least, the term of what's defined as the extended use agreement that we have with the state agency, which is 30 years. So it's going to be in excess of 30 to 40 years for that lease of that parking area.
What would be the timeline? I know you need, you're, once submitted, you're waiting for approval. What kind of timeline, and if everything would go as planned, could the Schaefer building start to be tore down?
Great question, and we had a brief conversation about that earlier. I have looked into the timing. It would just be impossible for us to take action on the Schaefer building prior to the full closing of our project. So to answer your question, Wiley, We will be submitting here next month on the 7th, the full application. Then the last Thursday of February, I believe, is the board meeting that IHCDA then makes the awards of tax credits. So I've told everyone by March 1st is when we will know if the project is moving forward or not. Once we receive the allocation of tax credits, we're 99% home. But that last 1% takes about 6 months of due diligence to bring an investor on board, to a syndication firm, so there's a period of time there that we have to get to the closing table. My guess is by this time next year we will be closed at the earliest, maybe late September, at the latest, maybe the beginning of October. But third quarter, late summer, early fall would be when we would actually close on the total funding package, and that would be when we could start the demolition of the Schaefer building. The last sheet there that I included in your package is action items. So this is what we're formally requesting here before council today. And I'll just read it here quickly to you. The development team is formally requesting that the council recommends to the city the following actions, which are all contingent on the award of the low-income housing tax credits on or before March 1st of 2017. Number one, for council recommends the city to provide a letter pledging to support the project in the amount of $275,000 and the funds to be available in the third quarter of 2017. That is defining about the closing time frame when this project will come together. Number two, council recommends the city to authorize the development team to demolish the Schaefer building no sooner than the third quarter of 2017. Again, we need to have a full closing before we'll be able to accomplish that. Number three, council recommends the city to enter into a long-term lease option agreement for the eastern portion of the Schaefer lot to be used for parking and green space for the residential artist lofts community. And then number four, council recommends the city to allow the development team to construct a city-approved parking lot on the western portion of that Schaefer lot.
Number three should be western.
Yeah, I think it's backwards.
Western portion.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had that backwards.
I was just sitting there
Got my
thinking the
directions
same
wrong.
thing.
I should have just said C site plan.
That's fine. Closest to building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those are contingent on obviously being awarded, which
Correct.
you would not know until March.
Right. I had a question on accessing the apartments, like on first floor, those two. Where would be their entrance into their apartment? How would they access?
So that first floor, floor plan Wiley, you can see there's a central corridor all the way through from front to back, the common space. So there will be both egress in the front and the back of the building. So the access into their apartments will be off that central corridor.
Off that common
Yeah, they
common
won't have
space
direct
there?
access to the outside. They'll come in through the secure
Okay.
corridor for the
All right.
apartments.
And then how about for second and third floor apartments?
Um,
Using this stairway that we see here in the corridor?
Much similar, and again, I didn't print those off for you, but there is kind of a central corridor on the second and third floor to access apartments on both sides.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, there's no direct access from the outside. It's coming into the building and then,
Correct.
okay.
Kevin, you're talking about the gray space that you're set up that the city will own.
Yes.
Are you considering that area up front?
Yes. The area, I should have better marked this on your diagram, but it includes the restrooms here behind the Arts Center, Tyler. So it would be this space forward, and then the business center here. This area here, this room is an extension of the business center, the co-working space, but it's only accessible for the residents. So it's kind of their private space within the co-working, if that makes sense. It allows us to include this space into the basis of the project for it to be funded through the residential housing project. but we wanted it in proximity so that they felt they had special access directly into the business centers, kind of the draw.
So, in turn, none of the space up front will be developed, correct?
It will be,
Shell.
yes, it will be, the shell will be improved. The fit up, the interior finishes are not part of that.
It's drywall finished, and that's it.
Yeah. Storefronts will be in place, new doors on the interior, or on the exterior, the lobby area, which will all be completely redone, the hallway will, but once you get inside this space, those interior finishes are not included.
So the lobby's going to be done, and that'll also serve as another entrance into your
Yes.
apartment complex.
Yes. That's kind of how we can get that funded, because it's dual purpose. And essentially, you know, the structure in here is the foundation of the apartments above, so yes, we still have to make those improvements for our residential units, but we just can't include in the basis and get paid for the fit up and finishes within that space.
Kevin, with where you have this room that's dedicated for the residents to use, the artists, how do you, because I understood that this was going to actually be owned by the city, correct? So do you just carve that out of what's going to be deeded to the city?
Yeah, just through a horizontal condo regime, that space can be specifically described and taken out of that parcel.
Okay.
Yep.
Kevin, when it says preference given to artists, what if artists aren't interested in 16 apartments? And who markets that to them? I guess. The concern when it first came out is it's not going to be artist occupied, it would be other occupants.
So, we can define what's called a tenant selection criteria, and we can give preference points or weight on a number of various different questions that they would fill out questionnaire as to how high they float onto the waiting list, essentially. Because of fair housing rules and regulations, we cannot discriminate, we cannot say, I'm going to choose you and I won't choose you. But we can do that through the preference points, as long as that is even and and does not adjust throughout. We can't change it every month. And this month we got one preference, and next month we got a different one. So the goal here is that we obviously want to give the highest preference to artists and attract artists in the community and provide excellent housing for artists that are already in our community. So the selection criteria will be assembled through input from the management company, but also through the local art community. We want to have their input on designing that tenant selection criteria, so they have input, but also for them to have input on the final say of judging those artists, who's an artist and who's not. So, but back to your point, if we open our doors and we have one artist show up and nobody else shows up that has any art ability, then we simply will then rent according to the area median income and the income qualifications for the housing project that's set by the authority. Now, we obviously want to attract artists into this housing complex because I feel that's what's going to make it work. We will, as a marketing company, or as the management company, we will be in charge of the marketing. We have a very significant budget in place through our development budget that will target those artists in the community, in the surrounding area.
But I think that it's also our responsibility as a city to partner with him to market this, because this is our strategic investment plan. This is what we said we were trying to do. So it's really incumbent on us to incorporate this into our marketing strategy.
I think if marketed properly, if marketed to various universities with arts that we'll have a waiting list of.
Which I think you already started that process.
We
I mean,
have.
this logo alone was University of St. Francis students that were part of this original study.
So it's going to require a strong partnership.
It certainly will. Again, we want this to be a community project, but I do want you to understand that we will have a budget within the context of this development for real hard dollars to be spent on marketing. But how that's who we target, how that is done, we certainly want this to be a collaborative effort with the community as well.
Is it, Kevin, and I know it's based on a particular provision under the code, Internal Revenue Code, but are you also allowed to give preference to entrepreneurs, people that maybe have an art background, but can that get weighted?
We can only give preference to artists.
Okay.
Well, but how do you define artist?
What's that?
How do we define an artist?
That is a very open interpretation, as it's simply one line in the code, the IRS, which they give preference to artists. It doesn't go any further to define or give an explanation of how those are defined. Now, other artist housing communities that have been utilizing this resource for 20 years now, one particular company that has been tremendously successful out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, they have properties, I think, in 48 out of 50 states right now, specific artist housing communities. The company name is Art Space, and we've been in touch with them over the last year and a half, 2 years on various occasions, and they actually do consulting for projects just like this. There's a very successful project that's opened up in Goshen about 2 years ago. We intend to kind of certainly work with, that's La Casa, is the not-for-profit that runs that artist housing. I know Larry Gauchi personally, he's the developer there.
What's the name of that project is?
Hawks something. I can't remember the...
They have a webpage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had, in the process a year ago, I called and talked to them about this, and it was a lot of, all their artists except for one came from Goshen. Now Goshen's bigger, it's got
And it's got a
college,
school, yeah.
right? But they actually attracted a resident from Martha's Vineyard that was visiting people there and saw this opportunity and decided to pick up and move to Goshen for this. But what was interesting to me was the whole process of how they marketed this thing. It was during the construction, they would have events, they would introduce, they would express what this is, and it was really, I think, a neat way of getting some excitement behind it that ultimately, I forget what he told me, but within 6 weeks, I think there was 30-some units in that were all full. So, for us to do 16, I think is reasonable.
And I've spoke with the mayor of Goshen, and yeah, he said that they had a waiting list right off the get-go. So,
Yeah.
waiting list of college graduates right off the get-go.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with the excitement that's kind of been generated out of the strategic investment plan here over the past year and a half, 2 years, and the connections that were not really just led by our team, but by Greater Decatur, and those connections with the University of St. Francis and with IPFW and Northeast Indiana Innovation Center that have all gotten visibility on this project and very excited about it and wanting to tie it into those various entities.
And we are in very close proximity. And easy access, US 27.
And there's also been some interest in, and I don't know if this is the direction we want to go or we can't, but I can tell you this is a possibility that in the tenant selection preference, we can also give preference geographically. So if we say, hey, we want to first give preference to our people here in Adams County or in Decatur, again, if we're consistent, we can do that. We can't exclude people, but we can give them a preference to flip at the top, if that's what we choose. But again, that's going to be community input that we want to evoke to make sure that this is aligning with the strategic investment.
What would the income level of the tenants need to be?
I actually have I brought this with me, Mayor. Oh, but I failed to. I left it at the office. I have the breakdown off of the federal website for Adams County, Indiana, area median income levels, the 30, 40, 50, and 60% of area median income by household, which is a one-person household through a six-person household, and then the rents that correspond with each of those. And I can provide that to you. I meant to bring that with me. And
Yeah, I was looking at that on the web page for the one in Goshen. They have it right on their web page.
yeah, and it varies slightly by county. So we might be the same. We might vary just slightly by theirs, but it would be essentially equivalent to kind of what their rents and.
So if we approve this, you would find out in November, or March rather, if you're awarded this. It's kind of a twofold question maybe to see. What happens if the Schaefer building falls down in January? Because it could.
It's bad. We were just in there last week. Well, you were there, yeah. You weren't, but Steve Hankinson was in there. Yes, it's bad.
Good question, man. I'm not sure if I have the right answer.
And as a city, I don't know that we have the answer either if it falls down in January.
Our intention after
We
closing
take ownership tomorrow.
is Jeremy's going to go buy OSB and we're going to board that puppy up the best we can.
Yeah.
Because if I heard you right, the demolition of that wouldn't happen until next October, next September maybe.
Yeah. I will tell you this. The state agency that administers the tax credits, this is a very, very competitive process that we're embarking in, very sought-after resource. There will be probably 50 or 60 applications, 12 to 16 awards will be made out of that. So we are held to a very high standard in being very detailed and having the proper information to be submitted to the agency. Once the awards are made, we have found them to be incredibly helpful and flexible in making sure that the project is successful. To give you one example, we had an application submitted here back in 2010 or 11 on a project that we received an award. We had a 36-unit multifamily development on paper as part of the plan, just like we will here. And we went back to the agency and said, we really aren't, A, we're happy with our architect, and B, we're not really thrilled with the outcome that we had on the plan. Can we change architects and design a new building? And they said, absolutely. As long as you have the same number of units and your budget is set by the credit, so you have to make it work within the budget. So we have hired a totally new architect and have a totally different building design than what we submitted with our application. I give that as an example, is that they want to see productive outcomes. If we came to them and said, listen, we have this letter of community participation that the city is to grant this to us. We've had a catastrophic incident happen in Decatur that the city is now requiring to take action to move forward. I don't feel that they would then go and rescind the credit back from us. I think there would be the flexibility to say, let's work within the parameters we have to make sure this project moves forward and is successful. The last thing they want to do is take a reservation back from a developer and cause, a project not to be successful and move forward.
Tonight we need to look at a letter. Do we need to do all these things tonight? Or does the letter take care of all that?
The action lines.
Yep.
Kevin, does the letter take care of all this?
The approval for the letter?
From the city, yeah.
Yes, everything that we are needing to move forward be contained in that document.
So are all these specific recommendations included in that letter that gets submitted to the state?
Let me relook at this. Tim, I don't believe the letter
The letter that we signed previously was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this letter.
Right.
The letter that we need to submit to the state just needs to look essentially like this letter with the financial commitment.
Okay.
The rest of those items are just, again, we want there to be that understanding with the city, timing-wise. Again, we'll need to have site control, not in the sense of for acquiring, but that lease agreement in place to make sure that we can access the property.
At what point would that be needed, I guess is my question.
We would like to have that lease put together prior, that needs to be done prior to our deadline of November 7th.
Okay.
A couple of quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
Dick, what's the total cost on this project, as far as the artist goes?
Not just the artist loft. Tyler, I know our overall package is right around $12 million for everything, for the whole package. I know I saw this number here earlier. We had a lot of moving parts in this budget. I believe the artist loft, probably including this package for the Schaefer, is around $2.5 million. I can get firmer numbers. I'd like to share that with the council here as that moves forward.
Okay, this is referring to a long-term lease option agreement.
Correct.
Is that what you need in place by the time you submit it?
For us to demonstrate site control, even though the project is not containing residential units, but because it's containing the parking as part of the project, is what we want, what we need to have by that deadline of November 7th.
Okay, do you need the lease option or do you need the lease itself?
The lease option.
Okay.
So lease contingent on being awarded.
So you
Yeah.
need approval of these four
things.
Yes.
requests.
Kevin, I'm going to ask the council what their concerns are long-term in doing a project like this. And I also want to ask you, what are your concerns if this goes forward? What kind of concerns would you have as the developer on this, as far as?
What concerns will we have? Well, we have, from historical perspective, we have had projects, and I guarantee there's always going to be
Unknowns.
a pothole that we run over. A couple of historical potholes that we've had. We got awarded tax credits for our project in Fort Wayne, got on site through our due diligence and found that we had unstable soils. Left almost $1 million gap in our budget that we had to go back, find additional funding, because once the credit is awarded and set, you can't go back and adjust your credits from the agency. So we worked with the city of Fort Wayne and found additional funds. Turned out to be less than $500,000 when we got to the end of the project. It was a $12 million project, so given the scale, it was still a fairly significant issue that we ran into. Another one we did in Fort Wayne, after the credit limit was set, we find out that the federal government required Davis-Bacon wages after. So we had to go back and find a way to fill that gap. And those are pretty strong, unprecedented changes that have had to happen, but we have always found a way to move these projects forward and make sure that we take them through to completion. I'm sure there will be a pothole somewhere along as we're moving through this project, and of course the next 2 years we get the award. But what we have done as a company is we always find a way to make sure that it gets accomplished. The unknown is kind of hard to define, the unknown, but
You gave us the timeline as to when you'd be awarded, when you could possibly begin taking down the Schaefer. Then what would the timeline be as far as renovating and finishing the music house into the apartments and, completion time? Approximately 2 years?
we're planning on a 12-month, 1 year.
From time of
construction
award,
time.
or?
From time of closing, so 18 months from the time of the award.
Okay.
or 12 months from closing.
Early fall or fall
Of 18.
18.
Yeah.
And then, as for concerns, I know Craig Koshaw is absent this evening, and he had some concerns that he said he was approached by some of his constituents in the 3rd District. And one of them was, again, the stigma of Decatur having an overabundance of low-income housing. And you and I visited this morning a little bit, and we talked about this. Could you maybe elaborate to council and to everyone present here where you are in the scheme of the low-income housing market in Decatur itself?
Well, Mayor, we contribute to the community in all housing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, from low-income housing at Senior at Village Green, we have 5 phases of senior housing, which I think fills a very strong demand here in the community for our aging population that are on fixed income. To the other end of the spectrum, where we've developed the golf course community, we have some of the higher-end homes in the community. I think our community needs housing of all types to be a cohesive community. I think that's really important. What I think is very important for the community to understand is that we have all levels of housing and all quality levels of housing, and we can all picture a couple, 2 or 3, 5 streets here in Decatur that are saddening, where product has deteriorated, where investment has not been made. And it's saddening to know that there are people living in those homes, largely rental homes, because they can't afford anything that's nicer, and so that's what they end up with. And largely management that is not professional management, they don't have any incentive to make those investments in those properties to upkeep them. And so what we want to do is we want to provide a high-quality product that is affordable. And hopefully we do displace a few folks out of that less desirable product in the community to offer these people a place that they can live with dignity and a high-quality product. So 16 units in the community, I think we'll do pretty well in finding some high-quality tenants that need this kind of housing. And again, I hope that there are artists in our community that can provide this benefit to our community that we've seen through the Artist Walk, that it's just created tremendous value in this community. So I know there are concerns about the low-income housing as a whole. I also like to point out that we don't own and manage every low-income housing community here in this town, and a lot of the communities that I hear are some of the more challenged. I like to clear the record, and those aren't our
That's what I was wanting to hear.
Yeah.
Nor have they ever been.
Nor have they ever been. But I guess the one example that was brought up last time was Belmont Estates, which is a single-family lease purchase. No, not lease purchase, I'm sorry. It is a single-family rental development built in, I think, the late 70s. We never constructed that property. We've never managed it. We have no association with it. I've talked to the owners of that property one time about 2 years ago. But other than that, I don't. All the apartments that are on the east of Highway 24, out on the other side of Richards, there's 2 Pine Crossing and another. Those aren't our properties either. And I've heard mixed things about management there. I don't know, but again, I don't.
Essentially, basically, I mean, you have Country Brook,
We have Country Brook.
and you have Village Green.
Yes.
And Village Green is predominantly seniors and handicapped and whatever people providing a nice place. Country Brook, you want to completely renovate.
Correct.
And other subsidized housing projects?
There are a few duplexes scattered around that were part of these other.
But the larger apartment complexes that are aside from Country Brook are not yours.
With the exception of Bellbrook.
Okay.
Which are
Bellbrook.
market rate apartments, those aren't subsidized in any way. There are a few other properties, small smaller properties that we manage for other folks here in town. We don't advertise or publicize that, but we've had people come to us and ask us to manage for them. And I can provide you a full list of all the properties we manage here in Decatur and the other 18 counties.
Well, I'm just asking these questions because I want to kind of clear the air to the public, you know, as to the fact that you are not the owner of the majority of the lower income apartments here in Decatur. At least it doesn't appear to be.
I know what you're saying, we're talking low income, but the fact of the matter is we're looking at him putting this unit in downtown that everybody wants to revitalize, and he's looking at putting $2 million into the facade of that building. Who else are you going to get to come into town and put $2 million into a downtown building?
Exactly.
Tyler, I think you're absolutely right.
Exactly.
I know
It's a building
I know
worth
everybody's
90,000.
worried about low income, but you're not going to find someone else to come in and put $2 million into a downtown
But
building.
and the other reality is that there are plenty of people already living on Second Street, second floors that would qualify for this.
And
And
it would force the other ones to come up in value. If you want to bring stuff downtown, you got to have people downtown to use it.
Yes, you're right.
And I think it's also important to distinguish, this is Section 42 versus Section 8. I realize that
Right.
it's not, there aren't common terms that everybody knows, but it is different. And I think if you look at the stipulations for low to moderate income in our community, I think you'll be shocked at how many people would qualify, because it's 60% of low to moderate, or household median income, correct, would qualify you as low to moderate. So I was shocked when I looked all the members up, I guess a year ago. So
Well, Tyler, to your point, we hope that not only it forces other people, but we hope that it incentivizes other people to make investments in downtown when you can have an investment that is as catalytic as this will be in the downtown area, that we do hope other investors, I mean, I've even told this to many folks that I would be interested in making market rate investments of condos into our downtown if we can kind of get over the hump and you have this kind of catalytic project that will happen. I mean, it's exciting because the Madison Street project, again, we don't quite know if we're there yet, but that's going to be happening right alongside where we're improving, you know, the shape of the parking lot, the green space, and you know, all the other projects that are brewing downtown. It really makes it exciting to see what the potential is. The whole riverfront, you know, a lot of really interesting opportunity there.
I do have one concern I will share. I think it's obvious, maybe goes without saying, but it's not just the 275 that we're committing to,
Right.
because it's the build out of those front rooms.
It's probably a couple $100,000 on
You know,
top
the
of
business. Now, so the question would be, when are we allowed to get access to those areas to do any work on?
We will be able to, the way this condo structure works is we physically have to have a building in place before we can subdivide it off. But the building's there already, so it usually doesn't happen at closing the one time up front, but it'll probably happen during construction. There may be some walls that we have to resituate around on the interior there, and as those get constructed and that space is physically defined, then we can come in and actually survey that off, define the space. It gets bifurcated out of the building into different ownership. So
it's not necessarily at project completion, it could be during project,
During.
so construction can happen at the same time. You know, the co-working space was obviously, that was all part of the original plan. I think ultimately, that is from the project. I mean, if that ultimately didn't happen, that wouldn't be a problem for the state.
no, well, it does. I'm trying to think through that, Cam. I don't think there's nothing contingent on that space being developed with our funding.
Well, yeah, okay. So because that was proposed, that was the idea, that's how it could be used, is essentially how it's being presented.
Correct.
Because there's a lot of hurdles that we're going to have to walk through to say, or jump over, whatever you want to look at it, to figure out, okay, how's that space going to be maintained, access, entrance. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to work very hard in the next year to figure out. let alone the art space, and, you know,
But
so,
the way it's designed though, in essence, it doesn't have to be renovated right away.
correct,
In essence.
correct.
In theory, it'd be great to have it right away, but there's no reason that it has to be done.
I mean, it just, all the stuff that we had talked about and we put forward in our seller, it's becoming a reality, and we need to be prepared to fund it, but move forward on managing it, and
Would there be a dedicated person?
Just some of the simple questions that we had on
With
the
the depot,
depot.
right.
I mean, this is going to be far more complex
Would it
than
be a
that.
dedicated position of management?
maybe,
Could be.
let's look at Melissa, she's hiding.
No, we can't do
I-
that. We can't do that.
I'm just kidding. But all I'm saying is that this is more than just the 275. We've got to be prepared financially, but also logistically to make it happen.
Well,
I think it's a great
realistically,
thing.
I mean, we've already set our budget for 17, but we can put a good chunk of money in 18's budget should this come to fruition. And even in 19, as far as, you know, what we can't get taken care of in 18, we can finish off in 19. So
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about us budgeting the money. I think we have plenty of time to budget it.
Yeah.
So,
One more point I'll just make, Cam, you bring up a very valid argument here that, you know, the city needs to be prepared as this train starts to leave the station about these other spaces that'll be forthcoming. And I just want you to know for the record, we're your partner in this, in that we want to work with you on making sure that those spaces happen and are viable, and there's a plan to move forward that makes sense but is not overly burdensome on the town to make sure that functions. Because I'll tell you what, I'm as excited about anybody in this room about the possibility of artist housing, co-working space, and entrepreneurship, and you know, I definitely want to see this happen, and if it requires us to have a creative collaboration to help make that happen, we're certainly all ears and we want to work with you on that.
Would Main Street be a component of the partnership?
I think so. I mean, I think you look at the Arts Council, you look at, I mean, there's so many different
All of
ways.
those, yeah.
Sculpture still doesn't have a home. I mean, there's so many different things that we could look at, but it's all part of the broader discussion.
Yeah.
All right.
before I look for a motion from council, I want to just ask anyone present, whether they're part of the city, city employee or general public, if you have any questions that we haven't addressed. Is there anything that needs to be asked that we haven't thought of?
How long is it going to be until the Shaver building comes down through Wade? I'm just curious.
1 year,
1 year.
approximately.
Is-
But if
From
in,
what I've understood of the meetings that I've attended, that could be very dangerous because of break-ins and kids.
It's going to get boarded up probably within the next week. Secure.
It's my understanding that the property has been owned by a gentleman out of state
Right.
in Wisconsin, and I don't think there has been any local representation up to this point for, I don't know how many years have you owned it?
More.
5 more years. So I think as of tomorrow, there will be a great stride forward that there will now be, you know, local representation to make sure that that building is
I
secure.
mean, let's face it, after tomorrow, it's going to be insured by the city of Decatur, so we have to secure it. And if Kevin's funding would go through, then third quarter of next year would be the soonest it could come down. If his project does not go, and we would find that out in March, then we have the money in the budget to take it down next year, and it would probably come down as soon as we could get a contractor on it. Jeremy's back there shaking his head, yes. Winter would definitely be better than in the summer and fall or spring. I mean, the winter time would be the best time to bring that down, in all honesty. So yeah, I mean, at the earliest, this coming winter, at the latest, a year from now.
Kevin, if you're awarded in February and no by 1st of March, and did you say earlier that if if we were genuinely concerned about the structural integrity of the building, is it something we could go to the state and get their okay to take it down sooner?
I would be more than happy to start those discussions with them on your behalf, certainly. And again, they've proven to be very easy to work with, level-headed.
Right.
It's not like walking into other state, federal agencies that I've dealt with in the past. But you can't even get somebody on the phone. But I would be happy to start those discussions.
Yeah, so there's a possibility that it could, if it were a serious enough issue that it posed a safety risk, we could approach him and try to work with them to get it down sooner than waiting
Tag
to...
team with you on that.
Especially if it's the money that's there, coming from
Right,
us. We're
it's
not
coming
using-
from us, so...
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the public? Dan?
One thing I was going to ask, I'm not sure if it's the state or federal dollars, and you're talking about credit, I don't know if it's a grant, and how much is that? I mean, how much is the funding that's coming through for this project? Good question, Dan. It's actually private investment that is being made in this project. And in return, those investors receive a federal tax credit off of their income. So I know that's kind of a complicated answer to the question, but does that answer your question?
So that they're private investors and they get tax credits for investing in
Correct.
projects like this.
In the amount of investment, there will be just a very small amount of permanent debt that exists on the property after it's completed. So it largely pays for the entire redevelopment. The credits are generated off of the hard construction costs that all go on the basis that fund the project. Again, to your point, where else is someone going to come and make this sizable of an investment in a downtown building that...
Well, I guess that was my question, is that if this gets turned down, if this part of the project still happen? I guess that's what I'm asking.
When you say this part, the...
Well, because you said it's Fort Wayne, it's Country Road.
Oh, it's an all or nothing kind of deal. And that's kind of why we're pulling all these levers to make it look like it does, because we're trying to touch all the hot buttons to the state agency that controls that credit to make sure that we're hitting all their priorities that they set forth. So it really is, it's really kind of an all or nothing.
So without the credit, in essence, the investors would no longer be interested in a project of that size.
So it's not really a grant.
No.
It's not a grant. Yeah. Another kind of interesting concept when you talk about this credit, I've had people ask me, is this where my tax dollars are going into a project like this? And the answer is actually no. Your tax dollars get paid into the federal government, and it gets dispersed into all kinds of entitlement programs and who knows where. But these projects are funded through a private investment, so there has to be a private investor on the other side that specifically says, I want to invest in this kind of a project to receive this credit. So it's an important point to make, because if this Section 42 industry weren't as successful as it was, it wouldn't be recognized and have a 20-year history of growing to the size it has, because private industry realizes how viable of a project these are, how low of a risk of a default rate, but also what a community service it becomes. So it is a specific choice that private investors make to invest in a project like this. So it also kind of makes you all feel good as taxpayers that, hey, even if I don't agree with that, my dollars aren't going there. Does that see what I mean?
Right.
So
who is the authority that makes the decision? Is it the investor, or is it a government agency that makes the decision whether we get it or not?
So that's another good question. It's a federal credit, but the federal credit gets administered state by state. And our state agency, and it's again the alphabet soup, IHCDA, stands for Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. They are the state agency that
creates the rule book and say, this is how we're going to administer these credits within the state of Indiana. And Ohio has a whole different agency and a whole different set of rules, and Florida and Texas, everybody has their, but at least the federal government isn't, somebody in Washington isn't deciding, well, this is the kind of housing that you should be building in Indiana. So it flows at the federal credit to the state agency. The state agency says, this is how we want the projects to look, and then the decision is made at the state level is who gets awarded the credits.
Am I correct that the investors themselves have a vested interest for the duration of the project?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not like I get my credit in my year one.
No.
It's an annual thing, and the credit is also contingent on the project actually working and doing what it's supposed to do, right?
Absolutely. That's very, very important. The investors receive their credit over a 10-year period, 10% for 10 years. So if something goes sideways in year 2, the investors have a middleman called a syndicator that represents them, and they have the ability to come in and take over the project. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow and my whole company goes under and we can't continue to manage it, the syndicator steps in and reassigns a new management company. So they have control at a certain level if the project, again, goes sideways or has problems. So there's all different levels of safety nets for a project to continue to be successful and move forward.
And the total investment in the downtown, I mean, I realize there's, the project encompasses Country Brook as well as the buildings in Fort Wayne, but the scope of the investment, Tyler mentioned somewhere around $2 million. Is that a figure?
I think 2.5, that's probably real conservative. I think it's going to be greater than that. But let me get better data for you, because I think that's really important for you to know what's happening here on 2nd Street versus elsewhere. I know that I mentioned we're going to be spending about $45,000 a unit at Country Brook.
And there's 48 units.
And there's 48 units. And then our hard costs for our homes in Fort Wayne will be about $140,000, $150,000 homes individually on each one of these properties. But you also have all the development costs that you need to kind of layer into that too. But I can get you kind of a specific number of
At least $2 million.
at the very least $2 million. It's probably more like 3.5 or 4, but
Yeah. So really, even if you added in the cost of developing the Creative Center, say the city has $400,000 to $500,000 total invested. If you're looking at a $4 million project, you know, on an in-depth project, it's usually 80-20. Well, we're looking basically 10% of our contribution for, you know, a $4 million project.
I think 2.5 is very conservative
yeah.
for all of that. Any other discussion? Comments? I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept these action items to include providing a letter of support for $275,000 toward this project.
I'll second it.
I have a motion from Cam and a second from Wiley, and just because I think this is such an important issue, I'm going to have a roll call vote rather than just a and nay.
Cam Collier,
Yes.
Matt Dyer,
Yes?
Tyler Fulenkamp,
Yes.
Wiley Sir.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Best of luck to you on this.
On the option, I need to get together with you on that, so, yeah, 'cause I need to get that done this week, so.
Does that have to be approved through us?
If you're authorizing the granting of maybe you need to go through these items, because there are other items besides the letter. But one that I would ask is that the council okays the negotiation of an option for a long-term lease.
Well, my motion was for all action items.
Okay, all right.
So,
We meet again on the 1st of November, so if there's anything that has to be okayed prior to your application, we can do it then, so.
Yeah, that would be fine. Okay, but, yeah, we'll be in touch here.
Okay.
Indiana Community
Yeah, I understood your
HCVA.
motion to
Tell him
move
again.
for action on it.
Kevin, we good, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on here. That's all that was on our agenda this evening. Are there anything from any of the department heads? Mike, you have anything on behalf of the police? Thank you, Mike. Jim? Roger, come on, Roger. Roger and I attended Maumee River Basin Commission's 30th anniversary celebration, and it was pretty well attended. And there were several people from Adams County there, the commissioners and some of the former board of directors and whatever. It was a really neat little celebration that Rod Rinkenberger put on. It had a very interesting speaker that I barely could understand because he talked scientifically over my head, but it was a nice little celebration we attended in Auburn. Ann, you got anything? Jeremy?
Leaf collection starts Monday. And run until the first part of December. And also, Ken received a letter from NDOT while he was on his trip last week. And we will be setting up a meeting within the next 30 days to learn all the particulars of our grant.
Good, good.
Mr. Carbach?
Building and Planning Department would like to get some information out to the public. We're noticing a lot of chicken coops going up in the city, and we just want to make sure that the public knows that they're living in residential area, and with our zoning, if they want to have chickens and that, they need to get into an agricultural area. And as long as they're living in the city, they're not allowed to have chicken coops. I want to get that out. And
Or chickens.
Or chickens. And another thing I'd like to get out is the last meeting of council, I made a statement that of the things that we're doing for soya or Bungie, they possibly could help us with the
Horn blowing.
quiet zone. And if I offended people on that statement, I truly apologize for that, because that was not my intent. My intent was if we're helping soya or Bungie, they possibly could help us and create a quiet zone with the railroad.
And that very evening, we voted to reduce the speed limit to make things safer along there, which was kind of what the whole process was.
So if people took my statement as being critical of Bungie, it wasn't, and I apologize for that. And the other thing I'd like to point out, that being zoning, or being ordinance, code enforcement ordinance
Officer.
I'd like to point out that I work closely with Phyllis, with Tim, with the council, with the mayor, and with all the department heads, and my sole goal as doing this is to make Decatur a better city and a more livable city and a cleaner city. And that's just my purpose. So,
Yep. And you do a good job, Bill. Thank you.
thank you.
Who's left here? Melissa?
Miss Ann.
Dan?
Good.
Melissa?
Next week is a recycling pickup on week, and the sanitation department guys have made a great suggestion that to make it easier for them to recognize which bins have recyclables in them, we have stickers, and these will go in everyone's bin next week during curbside recycling pickup, and it does double duty. It's got some recycling reminders, and also if you put this on the outside of your tote, the crew, when they come by and pick up your recycling, they're going to know there is recycling in there. There won't be a confusion if is this trash, is this something else. So these are going to be in your totes next week. You do not have to put these on your totes in order for them to pick up your recycling, but just a reminder, this does make it easier.
If it's on there.
So
Does they peel off sticky backs?
the peel off sticky back, it should be fairly weatherproof, but these will go in, you put out a tote next week, the guys will put one of these in the tote.
What if you don't have it? What if you have 2 containers of your own?
Can you put a sticker on
So
it?
she-
That's what she's saying.
Would you put them in there? You
Yes.
said you're gonna put them in the tote, will you put them in a...
It's whatever you put out that you're recyclable are in, they'll put this
Whatever the
sticker in.
container
Put
is.
them in a non-tote?
Yeah.
Right.
And there's still totes available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah. Public, any comments? Seeing none. Council comments?
Yeah, sorry. Depot. I think there's some things we need to clean up yet on this. Well, we don't have to solve all this tonight, but we talked about parking and putting, I think Billy made the suggestion of putting spaces on one part of that. I think we need to proceed with that, maybe even a sign that directs further parking to the south side of PD. Cleaning, we've got to figure that out. But the bigger thing that I'd like to see us take action on is, I guess, consider the non-reverting fund for Depot. So is that
the
through
rental.
resolution, or is that through?
That's an ordinance.
All the rental income goes back into a fund.
How about another ordinance?
Yes,
Jeez, crying, you guys are killing
make
me.
it so. Because obviously it's rented now, and we're going to start getting income for it, and we need to have a place to put it. So,
Suggestion.
but if we can think about I don't know, we got to solve the cleaning issue.
All good suggestions, yes, we'll talk about that. Any other? Phyllis has something.
The remonstrance period is over for the Miller Farm, Adams County Correctional Facility, so I just need to make a matter of record that it's been recorded and approve the filing that I had to do.
So moved.
Second. Motion from Wiley, a second from Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same?
I'll make a motion to approve the claims and
Second. I have a motion from Tyler and a second from Matt to approve the claims. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion from Matt and a second from Ann to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
There we go.